and welcome to Nana's Crafty Home. My name is Tanya. Today's tutorial is going to show you how to complete the simple sparkle scarf that you can find as a free pattern on my website. This is a beginner-friendly pattern, very easy. All you need to know is a chain and double crochet working in the back loops only, which gives it this wonderful texture that almost looks knit just at first glance. I used a fantastic yarn, the Lion Brand Mandala Sparkle, and this is a weight 3 yarn, also known as DK weight. Gauge is not important, however, with this scarf. If you wanted to substitute another yarn, you could certainly do that. I do use 2 cakes in order to complete the scarf to the size that I have here, which is, each cake is 328 yards, so I used pretty much all of both, meaning 656 yards. You could certainly customize this scarf to a different size very easily. If you wanted it shorter, you would just decrease the number of beginning chains. If you didn't want it quite as large around, you would just stop earlier in the pattern to the size desired. The approximate finished size, making it with the 2 cakes, ends up being about 18 inches tall from top to bottom and about 40 inches around. So it's a good size scarf. You know, I like it a lot because it makes it very versatile, a lot of ways that you can wear it. The color that I'm going to be making my video with is Hercules is the name of this colorway. Very bright, cheerful. My original pattern that I did here is in color Aquarius. Very pretty. And with the Lion Brand Sparkle, you can see here there's just little bits of sparkle here, hence the name of the yarn. There's a metallic thread that runs through that yarn that just gives it that special little classy shine. You could certainly use another yarn if you didn't like that look, but I think this just jazzes it up just a little bit, especially since it's such a simple pattern. So gauge for this, again, is not important. However, if you'd like to check your gauge against mine, 8 rows equals 4 inches, as well as 16 stitches equals 4 inches. So if you would like it exactly the size as mine, that's what you will need to check for. Your crochet hook that you're going to be using today is a size H, or a 5.0 millimeter hook, and that is all you need to get started. This, just a couple of notes about this pattern before we get started. This pattern is worked in rows, turning our work back and forth, so it makes a flat rectangle, which we then seam together at the end to get this shape. So very easy to follow. You're going to work in the back loops only. I am gearing this video to our beginning crocheters. So if you are really truly a beginning crocheter, this video is going to be at a pace that should be able to help you complete this scarf without difficulty. The chain 2 at the beginning of each round does not count as a stitch. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to want to do is make a slip knot in order to get started. So we're going to wrap the yarn around the index finger, pull it off, and pull up a loop. So wrap the yarn around your finger, keep the shape of that circle, and you're going to push the yarn through the loop and pull gently. This is your loop that you're going to put on your hook. So tighten that to your hook, and we're going to start our chains. To chain, you simply take your hook, grab the yarn, pull through one. That's one chain. Wrap the yarn around, pull through, chain two. Wrap around the hook, pull through, chain three, wrap around the hook, chain four. So continue that for 77 chains. 5, 6, and 77. So I have 77 chains. This is my beginning row, and what I'm going to do to start is I'm going to double crochet in the third chain from the hook, and then double crochet in each chain across. So this loop here, that is my first chain, that's my second chain, and there's my third chain from the hook. So counting back, 1, 2, and 3 chains from the hook, yarn over, insert your hook into that bottom loop. That's what I usually like to do with my beginning rows, is that bottom loop of your chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. That's my first double crochet made. Yarn over, insert your hook into the next chain, to that next bump. So this is the back side of that chain, and you can see these bumps on the back side, and that's where I'm going to work each one of those double crochets, is in each of those little bumps. So insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Second double crochet made. Insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So continue that. You're going to work a double crochet in each chain all the way down this row. You will end up with a count of 75 stitches, because remember, those skipped 2 chains from the beginning are not going to count as a stitch. Alright, so we have finished that whole row. We have double crocheted in each chain to the last chain and worked a double crochet in that last chain. Now, especially for beginning crocheters, but it's always good practice to verify that you have the correct amount of stitches every row, but particularly that beginning row. You want to make sure that you are starting where you need to be. In order to count your stitches, this is the beginning. This is where we started our row, and so this is where you see those skipped chains here at the beginning, because this right here is my beginning, my first double crochet. I worked that in the third chain from the hook, and it skipped these 2 stitches. So I started out with 77 chains. I ended up with 75 stitches because I skipped 2 chains, and when I count, I will make sure that I have 75 double crochets, and I will not count that chain 2. So each of these is a stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Continue counting all the way through the end of your row to make sure that you have 75 stitches. You can also tell at the top, if you prefer, you can count the double crochet posts as a stitch, but you can also count the 2 loops here at the top if that's easier for you. So at the top of these, there's a stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Go ahead and continue on counting your stitches to make sure that you have 75. Once you're certain you have 75 stitches, you will turn your work. So we will turn and we will work down the back side of that first row. From now on, each of our rows will be worked in the back loop only of each stitch. So to begin each round, you're going to chain 2, 1, 2. Again, does not count as a stitch. So we're going to double crochet in the same stitch. So this is a stitch, remember, this double crochet right here. I chain 2 right above it. There's a stitch that needs to go into that same stitch at the base of that chain 2. I'm working in the back loops only, so I'm going to yarn over to start my double crochet. I'm going to only work in the back loop. So typically I would insert my hook right here, picking up both loops, and then complete my double crochet. However, I'm only working in the back loop, so I'm going to insert my hook and only pick up that back loop, not 2 loops. So you are not going to see 2 loops on top of your hook. You will only see 1. So to work in the back loop only, again, you're going to pick up only that 1 loop that's in the back. So insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. I've just completed my first double crochet in the back loop only. Yarn over, insert your hook, and again, remember, back loop only, so only pick up the 1 loop. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over to start your next double crochet, insert your hook in the back loop only, so just this back loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. We're going to do that all the way down this row. So yarn over, insert your hook in that back loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So continue working your double crochet in the back loop only of each stitch all the way through the end of this row. And again, every row you'll end with 75 stitches. What's going to happen by working in this back loop only, it's going to create this nice little ridge, and let's take a look at that. You see how it ridged up that work because that front loop hasn't been worked in. This ridge is that front loop that we did not double crochet into. So it gives it a really nice simple texture. And it's just simply by placing your double crochet a little bit differently than normal. So I've reached the end of that row. You're going to want to place a double crochet in the top of that last stitch, that last double crochet from your previous row, and these are those skipped chains right here you can see on the end. These are my skipped chains from that beginning chain. They did not count as a stitch. I will not be working a stitch into them. So into that last back loop only, that last double crochet, work another double crochet, and you have completed that row. Again, count, make sure that you have 75 stitches. Make sure you haven't skipped any stitches. That way your work will not go in. It will stay straight. So basically, very simple pattern as promised. This is a simple 1-row repeat throughout the rest of the pattern. So we're going to repeat that last row until we reach the size desired for our scarf. So again, all we're going to do is a chain 2, which does not count as a stitch, double crochet in the back loop only in that same stitch, and work a double crochet in the back loop only all the way down our row. And you will do the same row for the rest of your scarf. I will come back when I reach the end of this cake. When I go to add in the cake yarn, the second cake yarn, I will show you how to incorporate that into your scarf. So I've used up the first cake. Obviously, this is not going to be large enough with just one cake to finish my scarf. So I'm going to want to bring in that second cake in order to finish this and give it the appropriate size. So when you are getting ready to bring in that second cake and you get to the end of your yarn, you're going to want to leave enough yarn to be able to safely weave that in well. And you're going to want to not complete your last double crochet. So you see here I've worked a double crochet and left the last 2 loops on the hook. To bring that second cake in, we're going to go ahead and get our next strand of yarn. Make sure that we leave enough of an end so that we can weave that in appropriately later. And you're going to yarn over, holding it so that it doesn't get away from you, and pull it through your last 2 loops, and that will complete your last double crochet. And you can see here I've got 2 ends to weave in. These are going to be plenty long enough for me to weave in appropriately after I've completed my scarf. And now we just continue on in our pattern. Double crochet in the next stitch in the back loop only, and again in every stitch. So when we come back, I will show you how to seam the 2 ends of your scarf together to finish your pattern. So I've used up most of the second skein of my Mandala Sparkle cake, and I have enough left here to seam this together. What you want to do is you want to keep a nice long tail, and a general rule of thumb for me that I use is to have it the length 3 times a generous size. So I just kind of guesstimate it. There's 1, there's 2, and then there's 3 generous passes. And now I know I'm going to have plenty to sew my scarf together and have some left to weave in that last end. As you can see here, I've not pulled through the yarn yet, but now that I'm ready, I have my tail ready to go. I'm just going to pull that through, which is going to finish off that last double crochet. And so now it won't unravel. Decide which side is going to be the right side. I don't think it's going to make a lot of difference because you're working in rows back and forth, but if you have a preference, those right sides are going to get folded together, and then you're going to sew from the wrong side. So decide which side is going to be your right side, and you're going to have that folded to the inside of your scarf. Then we're going to go ahead and seam this together. So in order to do that, I'm going to use what's called a mattress stitch for this seam. It's very simple, and you're going to need a tapestry needle to do that. And you're going to thread your yarn onto your needle. So how you're going to do that is you're going to start with the side, of course, that you still have your yarn attached. You did not fasten off and reattach. And I'm going to come down just a little so you can get a better look at what I'm doing. you're wanting to line the edges up. You want the stitches to be across from each other all the way down, so that way you don't have a crooked seam. You want these to line up perfectly with each other. So starting on this side, and you're going to come from down below. So you're going to bring your needle down below and work from the bottom up on both sides. And you're going to come across from one side to the next. So when your yarn is over on this side, you're going to come and work on the other side. Then you're going to come back and work on the other side, back and forth all the way down your seam, which makes it nice and sturdy and it won't come undone. And how we're going to do that is, because we're working in the back loops only throughout this entire scarf, we're wanting to give that little bit of an impression of the back loop only, even doing the seam. So that way we can try to make this seam as invisible as possible. So I'm only going to pick up the back loop only. I'm not going to pick up both loops as I'm sewing this together. I'm going to come from down below and I'm going to pick up just that one back loop and then pull through my yarn. Don't pull too tightly, but you do want this snug up against each other, and we'll just keep doing that as we go back and forth. And again, we're going to want to come back to the other side from down below, picking up just the one back loop only, and pull through your yarn. Again, the other side, pick up the back loop, pull through. Go to the other side, and we're going to go from stitch to stitch. You see here, these are lining up perfectly, and that's what we want. When I work on this side, I'll come back and I'll work and pick up on the exact opposite side. And then, since I've worked on both sides here, I'm going to move up one, do both, move up one, do both. Don't skip any stitches. You don't want any holes in your work. So just simply back and forth, picking up that back loop. This is going to make that seam as invisible as possible. And try not to split those stitches. Sometimes, especially if you have a skinny needle that's really sharp, sometimes it'll want to snag and go through part of that loop, you know, basically splitting it, but that looks messy. You don't really want that at all. So you want to pick up the whole loop without splitting the yarn. You want as professional a seam as possible. And I'm doing this very slowly, back and forth, so you can see what I'm doing as I'm going back and forth. But as you get a little more comfortable, you can pick up your speed a little bit, come through one and then don't pull all the way through and go to the other side immediately. And every 2 or 3 stitches, then you could snug up your yarn. And just as you're going, making sure that you're keeping your work evenly spaced and that you aren't having any gaps in your work at all. This is going to make that seam as invisible as you can make it. It helps when you end up your last row being the same color as your first row, and then using the same color to seam it together. Makes it a little better, but this cake didn't quite end up that way, so I ended up with 2 colors matching up, but that's fine. So just continue on back and forth, picking up just that back loop, and you're going to continue that all the way down through the end of your seam. So I've finished sewing to the end of that seam. You can see here that's pretty invisible from both sides of my cowl. Can't really tell where I've done that at. So now we're going to go ahead and weave in our ends. And so just put one of those on your needle. And I generally, if possible, especially on an end on the side of the cowl like this, I try to make it like tack it in with a little bit of a knot so that it won't unravel later. And see, that just tightens that right up, and then I can go ahead and weave in my end. You're going to want to make sure that when you're weaving in an end that you're not your yarn isn't visible from the other side. You're trying to weave it into the fiber so that it won't get loose, but also to where it's not visible from either side of your work. So just zigzag it around. I don't like to really go in a straight line too much because those have a tendency of working their way out. I like to zigzag it out of my fiber as much as possible. But also remembering that I'm trying to keep it invisible from both sides. And then I will usually double back towards the side where I started. And it just anchors that in place. It won't easily work its way out even with washing. And once you have a good amount of it in, go ahead, pull it a little bit tightly, snugly, and then take your scissors and cut close to the fiber or your project, but not to where you're cutting any of the yarn of your project. And then as you pull, that little end will get assumed into your project and you have no idea where that end is at, and it's invisible. So continue weaving those ends in, and I will be back to show you my finished cowl. After weaving in all of your ends, you've completed your scarf. You can go ahead and enjoy it at this point. You can see here this is a good size scarf. This can be worn in a lot of different ways, very versatile, and it has a wonderful texture working in the back loops only. So enjoy your scarf. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel to get notified whenever I release a new video. You can also find me on Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, and Instagram. I am happy to answer any questions that you might have about any of my patterns. Feel free to visit the written pattern on my website, free, at nanascraftyhome.com. And as always, have a wonderful day. Thanks so much for joining me. See you soon. Bye-bye.